There is madness, and it seems that whoever enters the Home Office is infected by this madness. So Shabana Mahmood has now done the same thing. It's like sort of saying, "Oh look, there's a foot. Let's shoot it." Beginning with the absurdity worthy of any great British farce, the Whitehall farces or something. Right there, it isn't so much the "Oh look, there's a foot. Let's shoot it." "Oh, there's a pair of trousers. Let's take them down." At a time when our prisons are bursting, our transport networks are understaffed, our essential services rely on imported skill and labour, the government has chosen to expel the very people holding the system together. The new immigration rules, raising the skilled worker visa threshold to 41,700, are not merely bureaucratic tinkering, they are a direct act of national self-sabotage. Prison officers, rail engineers, transport staff, many of them from West Africa, are being told that their visas cannot be renewed, that their work is no longer skilled enough, and that they must pack up and go home. It's a cruel irony. Only last year the Ministry of Justice was begging for recruits, turning to Nigeria and Ghana because hardly any Britons would apply for jobs in dangerous, underpaid, demoralising prisons. At HMP's Swaleside in Kent, nearly 40% of the workforce is foreign. Now the same government that issued their visas is threatening to deport them. This is not merely callous, it is catastrophic. Each officer costs about £10,000 to recruit and train. To lose them en masse is to drain an already hemorrhaging service. Governors' unions, even the Minister for Prisons, Lord Timpson, have pleaded for sanity, for exemptions, extensions or transitional schemes, but the Home Office under Shabana Mahmood appears immobile, and the message is blunt. British prisons must be staffed by British people, whether they exist or not. Lord Simpson, no ideologue, but a pragmatic reformer, warned that this policy will lead to operational suicide. The Chief Inspector of Prisons agrees, yet ministers continue to parrot the mantra of reducing net migration, as if that figure, an abstraction, were worth more than the safety of officers or inmates. And so we return to the same tragic cycle we saw after Brexit, when nurses and care workers were driven out by red tape, and the NHS discovered, too late, that slogans do not fit words, and do not fit wards. Today's immigration policy, designed to court Reform UK voters, is created with the same slow-motion collapse in other critical sectors. So let's not pretend that jobs in question are glamorous. Prison work is violent, traumatic, chronically underpaid. British applicants are thin on the ground, not because of migration, but because successive governments have degraded the profession beyond recognition. To replace experienced African officers with no one at all is an act of vandalism against public order. Meanwhile, the contradiction is glaring. The same government that wants to deport these workers is also struggling to deport foreign offenders because there are no staff to manage the process. This absurdity would be comic if it weren't so dangerous. Labour's immigration policy has become a theatre of contradiction. It talks of compassion, but practices cruelty. It preaches pragmatism, but enforces dogma. And worst of all, it undermines its own reform agenda by purging the very workforce that makes that reform possible. At HMP Liverpool, one officer, a Nigerian father who's lived in Britain for 3 years, has just been told his renewal is refused. He faces deportation within weeks, despite having done nothing wrong. His story is not unique. It is the predictable outcome of a government that confuses posturing with policy. We're not talking about people who have exploited the system. We're talking about people who are the system, keeping it functional, however precariously. There's a moral dimension, too, to recruit men and women from abroad with promises of stability, to rely on their labour, and then to cast them aside because of a political gimmick, is morally indefensible. It's abhorrent. And the people involved in managing and devising this policy need to be excoriated. Shabana Mahmood, lose her job. It's also economically illiterate. When the labour market refuses to supply enough domestic applicants, restricting visas does not create British workers. It creates vacancies, chaos and decline. Britain needs foreign workers, not as a luxury but as a necessity. They drive our buses, they nurse our sick, they staff our prisons, they keep our cities moving. If government policy continues to punish them for doing so, it will discover that ideological purity doesn't guard a prison wing or drive a tube train. We are, in short, shooting ourselves not in one foot but in both feet, and then blaming immigration for the limp.